The idea was to make this video post or around the release of the Netflix series or anthology film based on Satyajit Ray's short stories called Ray. Back then, I had no idea what the anthology was aiming to be. I figured that it would adapt the stuff he has written and present it in a way that would pay homage to his filmmaking and storytelling. And it is that, but again, it's also not exactly that. Hence, I thought it was important to provide some perspective. And also because I hadn't watched all of his films, and I wanted to use this opportunity to cover, review, rewatch the work of this important figure of film history and make my mom and the entirety of the Bengali community proud in the process. Yeah, they're easily impressed. The video is gonna be long, so let's not beat around the bush anymore. A few disclaimers. Firstly, the categories in this coverage are gonna be documentaries, shorts, duologies and trilogies, and then standalone films. And then I'm going to talk about the Netflix anthology series / film while drawing comparisons with the short stories they have been adapted from or inspired by to show how they fare as adaptations and standalone shorts / episodes. Secondly, please sit through the credits. In Satyajit Ray's films, the credits come before the film starts, so it won't be such a task to sit through them. Also, I think that modern films should bring that back. In the Netflix anthology, part of the credits takes place before the episode / short film begins, and the rest are shown at the end. So please sit through both of them. Request hai. Thirdly, like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and comments may tell me your favorite Satyajit Ray film or literary work, your favorite episode / short from the Netflix anthology, or just anything you want to talk about. Doesn't necessarily have to be about entertainment. I'm here for it. Okay, now let's begin. Another quick fourth reminder. I'm gonna view all of the stories here through the social, cultural, political and personal lens I have on my eyes right now. If that aligns with the lens through which the stories I'm gonna talk about, that's great. If it doesn't, feel free to educate me in the comments why that's wrong or right. Just saying that because with the exception of the anthology, there's a generational gap between me and Satyajit Ray. Clear? Okay, now let's begin. The documentaries in question are Rabindranath Tagore, Sikkim, Inner Eye, Bala and Sukumar Ray. And I'm gonna say that the one that I really enjoyed was the Sukumar Ray documentary. I'll tell you why. Modern documentaries tend to have a narrative in addition to documenting the reality of its subject matter. So that, it doesn't feel like you're watching a videographic version of the topic's Wikipedia page. But back then, I guess it wasn't the norm. It used to be just that, a chronological description of the subject matter. In the Rabindranath Tagore documentary, there's some dramatization, with the most flavorful one being that of Tagore's college play. And you get to see a lot of that dramatized way of documenting in the Sukumar Ray documentary, with the help of actors like Utpal Dotto, Soumitra Chatterjee, Santosh Dotto, Topen Chatterjee, Chiranjit Chakraborty, Robi Ghosh, Haradon Bandyopadhyay and Satya Banerjee. The rest are pretty plain. I think it was exciting for people who received these documentaries as first-hand information, but not so much now. There are no dialogues in this short film about a rich kid trying to one-up a poor kid. It shows that despite all that privilege and money, the rich will always be destructive and step on the shoes of those who are just bloody minding their own business. Why? Envy? Greed? Basic assholery? But the thing is that there's no end to it, and if you're like that, you're always going to be dissatisfied. Whereas those who were born with less will be content with what they have and continue to be better human beings. Also, on a side note, kudos to Satyajit Ray for not only capturing the behavior of upper class Bengali kids, but also predicting how they're going to be like for, well, forever, I guess. I'm going to be honest, I didn't quite get the subtext of this short. Like, I understood what's going on. A kid's mom is cheating on the father while the kid's grandfather is dying in the other room. I guess it's about the whole age of innocence coming to an abrupt end. In that sense, it's haunting because the short leaves you to your imaginations about what's going to happen now, that the parents are probably gonna go for a divorce and that the kid has seen death so early on in his life. After watching this, I made a note that why isn't this aired all over India every day? I wrote that because there's a rising sentiment largely being pushed by upper caste Hindus that casteism doesn't exist in India. There are multiple reasons for that. Whitewashing the image of said upper caste Hindus, gaslighting people hailing from lower castes so that they don't report casteist crimes or even remarks. But since we are talking about movies, a big reason behind this PR strategy is to stop the portrayal of casteism in mainstream or even non mainstream entertainment. That's basically it. They won't stop being casteist. Instead, they are doing all this whitewashing, much like the Pandit in the short. He could have easily done what Om Puri's Dukhi asked him to do. Instead, he caused his death and then dragged his dead body through the mud into a pit. And the reason they would rather do that instead of putting a stop to their casteism is because their conscience is dead. What can I say about this that hasn't been said already? And that's a phrase that you can apply to most of these films. Well, one thing that I did notice during this viewing is the borderline demonic presence of the train, which is usually seen as a sign of progression or technological advancement. But here it signals change, and mostly negative change. Durga falls ill shortly after the famous train sequence, and the sound of the train is heard while she is sick. The opening shot of Oporojito is the train, and Opu's to and fro from Kolkata is indicative of the growing divide between Opu and his mother. Oh, and they live closer to the train lines in comparison to Pother Panchali. In Opu's Sanshar, Opu lives next to a house beside the train station. The last time we see Aparna is on the train, and the concluding moments show Kajol dropping the toy train, thereby rejecting its curse. The second thing that I observed is the bitterness and apathy that is generated through poverty and loss. It is such an overlooked aspect in modern films, especially in Indian modern films where the struggle to be decent and human in the strictest sense is rarely associated with systemic oppression. So, yeah, seeing that was truly mind blowing. I found it a little difficult to understand the thematic connection between Postmaster, Monihara, and Shamapti. According to my limited knowledge, I think that it was about the liberation of three women hailing from three different socio-economic backgrounds in three very different ways. Ratan was bound to be exploited via child labor, but she receives education from the postmaster. Monimalika was bound to drown in her doubts about her husband and her love for materialistic shit. But she is united with both of them in the afterlife. And Mrinmoyi was bound to be this directionless free spirit, but she gets direction after a union with Amullo. I don't quite agree with the last one, but yeah, I think that's the case and they execute it to perfection, which is another phrase I'll be using a lot of times here as well. Again, I thought it would be easy to understand the relation between these two movies, but it wasn't. Yeah, it seems like it's just about a cowardly man and a mighty man. However, it's way more nuanced than that. In Kapurush, Amitabh and Bimal's masculinity is just all over the place. And it is actually Koruna's femininity that shines as she rejects the cliche of running away with a lover. So yeah, the word Kapurush here, which is synonymous with cowardice, actually defines the silent misogyny that men perpetuate by thinking that women don't have any agency in their life. Similarly, Mahapurush gets a makeover. It's a word usually used to define men who are larger than life. But here the center of attention is a man who is only pretending to be so, but is basically conning a family for food, money and more. Yeah, dude legit asks for a dish made of Jolohosti meat. Jolohosti bole to hippopotamus. I'm not even kidding. And he's doing all that under the garb of religion. So the movie shows why it's important to out these people, even though at the end they will get away with the money, because that's the power of Andhbhakti. I'm 90% certain that if this movie had been released now, in this political and cultural climate, Satyajit Ray would have had a few FIRs against him. I am biased towards Shunar Killa. I think it was the first Satyajit Ray movie I had watched, and it was perfection for me then, and it is perfection for me now. Great acting, great editing, great background score, great visual storytelling, and great cinematography. It has one of the best, if not the best, golden hour sequences in film history, and I will be hearing no arguments against that. As for Joy Baba Felunath, I think this was my first proper viewing of it and I really enjoyed it. I mean, think about how abstract the mystery wala angle of this movie is. Spoiler alert for those who haven't watched it. Feluda is brought in to not catch the thief, but to catch the person with the intention to steal. Because the actual item in question is never stolen. And the person who puts Feluda on the case knows that. But hey, it's still very entertainingly done and it even manages to hit out at religious gurus who are in a transactional relationship with the wealthy for some kind of mutual benefit. So, yeah. Both of them are classics and qualify as these pieces of entertainment with some next level hard hitting social and political commentary which is delivered in the most soft, sugary way possible. Hirok Raja Deshe is slightly more direct than Gupi Ka and Bhagabain with its depiction of attacking educational institutions, daily wage laborers, mines, brainwashing, detention centers, using money to erect monuments while the people of the kingdom are hungry, and cutting down on dissent and dissenters. But yes, these two films are exceptional examples of how you can comment on so many so-called controversial topics by harnessing the powers of the fantasy genre. I mean, just look at that Bhuter Nath sequence. How do you do that? Seriously, I need to know. Like I see this and I scoff at filmmakers who complain about how their dark and gritty commentaries on society and politics are not getting a pass. Duh, obviously it won't. You have to be smart about it just like Satyajit Ray was. You have got to hide your message in intricate production design, costume design, music, lyrics, and above all, acting. Satyajit Ray did it back then, so stop making excuses now. Here's another great example of using fantasy to talk about something like greed. And that too without the use of grand visual effects and focus on great character work and acting. Also, nowadays slapstick comedy has gotten such a bad rap. But if you watch this, you can learn about how to walk the line without undermining the subject matter, like at all. It's a small movie though, so the pace can be a little too fast to catch some of the transitions. However, since it wears its philosophy on the sleeve, I can give it a pass. This is probably my third favorite Satyajit Ray movie, and I want to mention that because as far as I know, that this is one of his most underappreciated films. I'm aware of the fact that parallels have been drawn between Hirok Raja Deshe and Indian government's actions. But I think Jalsa Gore is an accurate representation of the man of the hour in India. He is so obsessed with being entertained that he doesn't care about his loved ones. He keeps throwing money to maintain his flamboyant image in front of everyone. And he is deeply classist and hence is unable to share his resources with someone from a lower class and coexist. Instead he chooses to go out in a blaze of glory. बस इधर रियल लाइफ में ये blaze of glory कुछ ज़्यादा ही देर चल गया है. Another film by Satyajit Ray which would have courted so much controversy in terms of its portrayal of Hinduism and the god-woman deification thing. I don't know the exact term for it, but you get what I'm saying. So yeah, all that is pretty apparent and how coincidences are being interpreted as divine intervention. However, the thing that really struck me, and I'm unsure if I have seen it play out anywhere else, is the dilemma between choosing to stay in this deified avatar or rejecting it despite knowing that it's all fake. Because you see, before Uma Prasad's father had this dream slash vision that Doya is a goddess, she was just a regular housewife. But now she's a goddess. She's beyond the kind of scrutiny women face. If a problem gets solved coincidentally, she can take full credit. If something goes wrong, leading to even death, she can threaten her naysayers with religious curses or saying that they lack faith. And that poses a great question about the extent to which a woman has to go in this society to get the respect that they need and deserve to simply exist. In my opinion, this is one of the best written films of all time. There are 3 subplots representing 3 stages of a marriage. One is about to be born, one is on the verge of death, and one is somewhere in the middle. And it's all explored through the most organic dialogue I've ever heard. Like it really walks the lines between massive metaphors and just everyday stuff that we say. In addition to all that, it aptly captures the snobbishness and utter ignorance of upper class Bengali men. I mean, you can say every upper class man is like that, but there are certain elements that are very specific to the Bengalis. And it is utterly bewildering that those things haven't changed, even now. Bengali women who are made to marry within the community still have to choose between these snobs or what we call a hababoka. I know that films that are highbrow science fiction or something are termed as ahead of its time. But for me, it's these kind of movies from Satyajit Ray that seem so ahead of their time. I got a bone to pick with cinephiles and, well, every other human being who doesn't talk about this movie in the same way as they talk about Taxi Driver. Because Taxi Driver is essentially an edgier and bloodier version of Obijan. I hear you clicking away on your keyboards to check which came before. उतना कष्ट ना उठाए, मैं बताता हूँ. Obijan came out in 1962, Taxi Driver came out in 1976. Also, here's a hot take. I think that Obijan is much better than Taxi Driver. Because while Taxi Driver talks about toxic masculinity and the white knight complex and eventually kinda becomes problematic, Obijan talks about all that and it explicitly deals with casteism, which instantly makes this movie way more relevant. And it spends time on fixing Noroshingo, thereby giving his savior moment to make so much sense. So yeah, टैक्सी ड्राइवर देख के खुद को ज़्यादा तोप मत समझो, ओबिजान देखो, उसके बाद आना मेरे से बात करने. In the first half of Mahanagar, I was straight up like, "Arey, I have watched this plot so many times. The women of the house wants to get a job, but the flag bearers of patriarchy won't let her because a woman shouldn't be the one to put the food on the table. They should just cook the food." But then I said, hold on a minute. This movie came out in 1963 and is set during the 1950s, which is the time when women were actually venturing into jobs. And the norm was to oppose it. And it is still happening now, in 2021. And that kind of epiphany completely changed my reading of the film. It shows how men, especially those from slightly or completely privileged backgrounds, will be all high and mighty when everything is going all right. But when it isn't, they will wallow in self-pity or do stuff that doesn't help anyone in any way. But they won't let a woman work. I think Anurag Kashyap's Choked can serve as a great modern companion piece with Mahanagar because it is also about a woman trying to wade through unprecedented circumstances while the man of the family just sits around and complains. Also, this is Joya Bachchan's debut movie and she's hilarious and she really stands out despite her short screen time. And I think that through her character, there's a really good and important message about teaching the importance of feminism from a really young age. Great visual storytelling, great acting, great production design, great everything. But I don't like this movie for two reasons. Or maybe it's a two-part one reason. Okay, without overcomplicating this any further, here's some context. So the book that this movie is based on, Nostonir, by Rabindranath Tagore, was allegedly about the relationship between Tagore's elder brother, his brother's wife and Tagore. And his brother's wife had apparently died by suicide after Tagore's marriage. And since I am not really great at separating the art from the artist, or in this case separating the art from the source of its source material, I can't in good conscience say that I liked it. I want to reiterate that it's great in every way, except its presentation of the titular character and the puppy dog like presentation of the men in the story. Sorry, but not exactly sorry. I've written down in my notes that this is understandably one of the best films in film history, not just for the craft that's on display, but also in terms of perfecting this type of storytelling where an actor critiques his own stardom by playing a fictional version of himself. I mean the balls, the absolute goddamn balls it must have taken to take this story to Uttam Kumar, the Uttam Kumar, and get him to do it. And the kind of balls it must have taken for Uttam Kumar to do this. I guess convincing Uttam Kumar via the stuff that has parallels with his personal and professional life must have been easy. But what about those surreal sequences with the protagonist facing his own demons in a desert of money, or him chasing an actress who had come to him for work? That said, while most of its metaphors are very clear, one that kept going over my head is the subplot about Pritish, whose name rhymes with British, pursuing a potential investor. The interpretation that I arrived at was that it showed that Arindam's fear that his demand would wane with age was unfounded, because here's this old dude who is in demand despite his age. On a side note, while there have been modern and quite blatant reimaginings of Nayok in the form of autograph and fan, I think that the one that fits the bill, especially in terms of a truly modern take, is AK vs AK. Yeah, this is one of Satyajit Ray's weakest films. But even his weakest is 100 times better than the strongest films that are coming out nowadays. It has a brilliant Uttam Kumar performance, and I kinda like the premise as well, which was basically about finding a singer who went missing and is now probably hiding in an asylum for convicts. And Bomkesh and Ajit have to find her because people are getting killed there. I just think that they should have done more in the makeup department to make one of the asylum dwellers look less like the singer they're searching for. Because once you figure out who it is, it seems dumb that one of the best fictional detectives is taking so much time to get it. Other than that, yeah, good film. How did we go from portraying privileged people going on a vacation like this movie does to Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara and Dil Dhadakne Do? Pray tell me. Like, it's not even about doing serious films or anything. It's just about having a level of awareness. Here, Satyajit Ray allows them to look suave, act posh, and be smooth, but they are functioning in a fictional world that's similar to ours, where casteism and classism exists. So why would you go out of your way to separate your story from these very real life problems? For entertainment? If you say that, that's your privilege talking. I mean, you can make your story entertaining and be realistic. For example, Oshim, Shonjoy, Hodi and Shekhar seem extremely enjoyable and nice when they are in their little bubble of privilege. The moment they step out of it, they seem like assholes. So you are getting your moments of entertainment, and then you're also being asked to introspect what makes something nice and entertaining. Make shit that makes your brain work. दिमाग use नहीं करोगे तो सड़ जाएगा. I jokingly said that this movie is like the nightmare edition of Wake Up Sid, because the protagonist's name is Siddhartha and he's looking for a job, and it's nightmarish in nature. But yeah, all jokes aside, this almost plays out like a horror movie. On the surface, it's about the job crisis, Siddhartha's anxiety due to his joblessness, plus his sister being the sole earning member of the family, plus his father's death, plus his brother's plans to venture out into the vast, cruel world. And I really commend Satyajit Ray's abstract portrayal of all that. He uses photo-negative imagery to indicate Siddhartha's anxiety attacks. He breaks the linear nature of the narrative with these surreal sequences. And then in the last 15 minutes, he does a dissolve between skeletons and the job seekers. You know, to say that देश का youth job ढूंढते ढूंढते मर ही जाएंगे. And kudos to Dhritiman Chatterjee for channeling that rage and anger that most of us in India are feeling even today. In terms of overall pacing, this movie drags a lot. And the stilted performances from the cast, with the exception of Sharmila Tagore of course, doesn't really help. But the subject matter and the way it's handled really trumps all of its shortcomings. And again, what scares me is that Shimaboddo was made in 1971. This is 2021. Bosses in corporate companies are still pulling this kind of shit. They're still keeping all the money to themselves and keeping their staff underpaid and overworked. And when they are on the verge of going bankrupt, they're putting that underpaid and overworked staff under the bus, sometimes literally and sometimes metaphorically, to bail themselves out of that sticky situation. And there are well-constructed scenes after well-constructed scenes of these bosses plotting to go to any extent to ensure that that mistake is never discovered and not even giving it a second thought. Well, until they realize that how far they have gone and the ties they have severed in their race to the top, whatever that top stands for. And while you see Shamol showing some signs of regret, I don't think his current real life counterparts are gonna feel even that. When a movie or a show is made where a very real life event serves as the backdrop for a completely fictional plot, we see that the fictional plot becomes more prominent and the commentary on the backdrop, which I guess should have been the object in focus, just fades into oblivion. And the excuse that's used to defend their inability to tell a cohesive story is that, oh well, if you want to watch a documentary, go watch a documentary. Now, if you want to put all those excuses aside and see how it's done, you need to watch this movie. It is stated pretty explicitly at the end that the film is about the Great Bengal Famine of 1943, where around 2.1 to 3 million had died of starvation, malaria, and other diseases aggravated by malnutrition, population displacement, unsanitary conditions, and lack of healthcare. But until that final slate comes up, your attention is captured by the devolving state of a village. It begins in a very casual way and then it escalates and escalates, and there are fights over rice, and women are using their bodies to get food, and it's horrific. So, by doing that, Satyajit Ray didn't make you watch a documentary and told a compelling, albeit fictional story that highlighted a very real event. Seekho yaar, kuch seekho. While going through Satyajit Ray's filmography, if you start to wonder why are a lot of his movies about unemployment, you should counter wonder that why aren't there more movies about unemployment now, since the unemployment rate is soaring now more than ever before. But yeah, this is yet another brilliant and haunting film about an unemployed man searching for an alternate way to earn money and be self-sustainable. However, that path isn't the most clean one, if I can say so, and he has to choose between being moral and having money in his pocket. Initially, I thought this was very anti-independent business and very pro 9 to 5 jobs, with Robbie Ghost playing a very modern version of the devil and all that. However, as I sat with the movie, it became clear that Ray wasn't exactly taking sides. He was just showing that this is how it is. If you want to break out of one mold and create your own thing, you have to face some shit that has been put into place by people who have come before you. And because men are misogynistic, they will find a way to grossly mix business with pleasure, along with a splash of exploitation of the underprivileged class. I know, I have said it already many times, but please, seekho kuch. My parents hyped the bloody hell out of this movie, and that hype was increased by the movie's ensemble cast. And of course, because it's a Satyajit Ray film. But I didn't like it. Production design wise, acting wise, yeah, it's great, but I didn't like it. That's all I'm going to say about Shatranj Ke Khilari. While watching this movie, you have to keep in mind that Satyajit Ray had suffered 2 heart attacks during its shoot, and it was completed by his son, Shondeep Ray. And it is a cohesive movie with a thought-provoking commentary on idealism and diplomacy through Soumitra Chatterjee and Victor Banerjee's characters, and how you can kind of lose yourself when you're caught in the middle of this ideological battle without any prior knowledge about either ideologies. But yeah, it's quite slow and kind of boring. It is beautiful to look at, and again, even at his worst, Ray's films are better than anything you are seeing now. But still, yeah, not my cup of tea. Let's just keep it at that. As far as I know, while making this amazing movie, Satyajit Ray was recovering and his movement was kinda limited. And despite those limitations, he made this masterpiece which is so bloody relevant, because it is about a contaminated water body which acts as a supply for the Charanamrita / holy water at a temple. And as a sane-minded person, Soumitra Chatterjee's Dr. Gupta wants to shut the temple down for a few days or until the contamination is contained. But you know how well science and religion agree with each other. So yeah, Dr. Gupta is turned into the punching bag of the region because he's doing anti-religious things. Nobody could have seen that coming, right? Because how dare a doctor try to prevent people from dying by using his medical knowledge? The movie has 3 very intentionally blood-boiling moments which highlight why religion is what it is. At first glance, it looks like it ends on a kind of optimistic note, with Dr. Gupta being reassured that there are sane and logical people behind him. But then the final frame shows the bottle of Charanamrita and a stethoscope on the same table, thereby hinting at the fact that science and religion को equally treat किया जाएगा इस देश में. If that doesn't make you shudder, nothing will. This struck me on a personal level. So if you don't want to hear all about that, please know that it's yet another well-constructed, well-acted, well-directed, well-written movie by Satyajit Ray, and move on to the next one. If you want to hear about all that, well, keep watching. The plot revolves around a family which is brought together after the father suffers a heart attack. But instead of being one of those events where everybody puts their differences aside after a long time and becomes a family, it actually exposes who these people are as a family. It breaks the father's illusion that he has raised his children properly and failed the middle child only, whereas it is kind of the other way around, and the middle child is the one who is actually dependable, at least emotionally. On top of all that, the only kid in their family is exposed to his parents and his relatives' ugly sides. So, yeah, it is pretty dark and depressing, and very similar to what I went through as a teenager during my paternal grandfather's and maternal grandmother's last few months of their respective lives. Hence, it was quite eerie to see that this happens in almost every family, fictional or real. And I would tell people to show this to their parents so that they become more responsible and just, not act like assholes. But if they are in their 50s and 60s, maybe they are beyond change. Therefore, I urge you, yes, you, to watch it carefully so that you don't become assholes and set a bad example for the younger people in your family or extended family. I had a very weird observation after watching Satyajit Ray's final film. Atithi Tum Kab Jaoge, the movie starring Ajay Devgan, Paresh Rawal and Konkona Sen Sharma, technically ripped off Aguntuk, stripped it of its nuance and turned it into a stupid slapstick comedy. Do whatever you want to do with that observation. Coming to the movie itself, I think that the notion that this was Ray's final film is quite humbling. Instead of going out on a big bombastic note, he chose something so intimate and something that reflects nuclear families and shows why exactly they end up being territorial and stringent. It doesn't diss the ancient expectations of the older generation, and it doesn't quite critique the limitations of the present generation. It just observes this gap and asks us, the viewers, to think about a solution where both parties can emerge from it in an amicable fashion. Awesome message, awesome storytelling, awesome acting, full marks. I'm going to judge these shorts or episodes on the basis of how well they have adapted the short stories they are based on, how well they have adhered to Satyajit Ray's filmmaking and storytelling, and how well they fare when you throw away the labeling of Ray. I'm aware of the fact that some or one of the filmmakers of this list have stated multiple times that these are their takes on Ray's short stories, and that's it. And I disagree with it. When you're putting your short stories in Satyajit Ray's frame on the poster, and Satyajit Ray is slightly more popular for his filmmaking than his short story writing, and since your stuff is being presented via an audiovisual medium, I have to take all those things into consideration. Alright, first up is, as an adaptation, this Srijit Mukherji directorial kind of follows the short story. As in, it is a revenge story where the protagonist is made to think that he is suffering from memory loss. But my god, does it veer into such strange territories in the worst ways possible. The performances are fine and Ali Fazal is good, but all the changes that have been made are so unnecessary and hateful. In terms of adhering to Ray's school of filmmaking, it fails horribly. And when you take away the Ray-based labeling, it's just a whole lot of noise. This is by Srijit Mukherji too, and no points for guessing that it fails on all three fronts as well. It is full of unnecessary changes to the source material. Mukherji puts in explicitly violent and sexual scenes for the sake of being edgy and adding nothing to the viewing experience. And when you take away the Ray label, it's hands down one of the worst short films / episodes I have laid my eyes upon. And it is a matter of shame that it is made by a Bengali. As an adaptation, this Abhishek Chaubey directorial is the best, as it sticks very close to the source material and makes slight changes in a character's profession and in the ending. The short story has a darkly comedic ending, while the short film is kind of optimistic. In terms of filmmaking, Chaubey brings in Ray's mix of real and surreal while limiting its setting to just one location, or at least maintaining an illusion that everything is happening in one location with the help of some beautiful VFX and production design. It even has some shades of Shatranj Ke Khiladi in the dialogue writing department. And what can I say about Manoj Bajpayee and Gajraj Rao that hasn't been said already? They're amazing, just amazing. And if you remove the Ray labeling, it's still a great short film. Straight off the bat, I'm gonna say that this is my favorite out of the lot. As an adaptation, Vasan Bala and Niren Bhatt take the short story and explore its underlying themes from the perspective of a character, the film star, who was merely in the background. They add in a lot of Nayak and a bit of Mahapurush and a bit of Devi. I mean, the Nayak parallels are right there with Harshvardhan's Vic. And Didi is a mix of Birinchi Baba's religious facade and Doya's use of a religious facade to get the respect she wouldn't get if she was just some regular girl. On top of that, they add so much modern commentary about the prominence of a film star versus a religious figure. In terms of filmmaking, it has some great costume design, set design, production design, music, and the whole one location setting. Harshvardhan is amazing as the star grappling with the fragility of his stardom, and seeing him do that whole thing of blurring the line between the fictional version of himself and who he is, both as a star and as a person, something which actors like Uttam Kumar, Prosenjit Chatterjee, Shah Rukh Khan, and more recently Anurag Kashyap and Anil Kapoor have done so late in their career, is mind-boggling. Chandan Rai Sanyal and Akansha Ranjan Kapoor's supporting acts are amazing. Vasan Bala, the director, is great in this cameo role. But by now, you know who's the showstopper. It's Radhika Madan. She had what, 15 minutes of screen time? And she knocks it out of the park. And if you remove the Ray labeling, not only does this stand on its own as a great short film, but it also looks like a great Satyajit Ray fan film, filled with references to Gopika and Bagabain, Mahapurush, Devi, Nayok, and Hero Rajat Desai. If you have made it this far, congrats! Now you get to hear my final thoughts on this Renaissance period that we are going through. Renaissance. Get it? Come on, I had to. Alright, enough dilly-dallying around. Final thoughts. Yes, Netflix's Ray series first. Just watch Hangama Kyun Hai Barpa and Spotlight and call it a day. Well, no, don't call it a day. Call up Netflix and tell them that it is kind of hypocritical of them to make a whole series/anthology film on Satyajit Ray and not have a single Satyajit Ray film in their catalogue. Then call it a day and go to Amazon Prime Video or MUBI to watch some or all of his films, like I did. And I urge you to do that because only after doing so, you will not only get to experience his evolution through the years, but also realize how privileged most of the modern filmmakers are, and yet they are still failing to do anything close to what he did with almost nothing. And if you're not as cynical as I am, just enjoy his films and filmmaking. On that note, I'll take your leave, but jate jate, please do like and share this video. This has been almost a month in the making, and it will be great if it reaches more people. Comment karo what's your favorite Satyajit Ray film or what's your favorite short from Netflix's Ray. Subscribe to my channel and please stay safe and stay healthy.